Communication coach, consultant, and author Michelle Gladieux joins the Plutopia podcast this time as we discuss her book, Communicate with Courage.
As far as we know, this is a one-way ticket, and we should share what we've learned. We should share about ourselves. We should care about what others think, and we should stand for what we think is right. And we should try to do it without being a jerk. So I think we all need communication skills, constantly polishing verbal and written and listening skills. And I think also we all have a message to bear based on our experience. So I wanted to give people a short book. I think I kept it around, I have one right here. I kept it around, 140 pages or so, because I know we're all busy, but I wanted to take about 25 years of coaching and teaching at the college level and consulting and see what I could do for those people who aren't going to enroll in a communication class in a college or go to a workshop. Maybe this was a way they could raise their game.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Plutopia News Network podcast. This episode is hosted by Scoop and I, as always. Scoop Sweeney, my partner there, he's out in Elgin, Texas, and I'm John Lepkowski. I'm somewhere in the vicinity of Austin, Texas. And our guest today is Michelle Gladieux. Michelle, where are you?
Well, I'm in Florida for a few weeks, working and being warmer than my usual climes, which are Indiana. Fort Wayne, Indiana is where my company is headquartered.
It's good to warm up.
Yeah, I just wanted to get a little bit warm, so I usually don't have, my walls in Indiana aren't this color, but this is a rental.
That's a great color.
It is a great color. Makes
Michelle
me happy.
Michelle is the author of Communicate with Courage, Taking Risks to Overcome the Four Hidden Challenges, which we'll talk about today. She's also the president of Gladieux Consulting, and they design and present seminars in communication, leadership topics all over the place, really. And she's been in business for a couple of decades, and she's also an executive coach, a strategic planner. We probably need a lot of your advice. And we definitely enjoyed reading your book.
Good. I'm so happy to hear that, because I consider you both brave communicators whom I can look up to. So it means a lot that you dug in.
We feel pretty safe when we're here on the podcast. I probably don't communicate with quite the same level of I don't know, what would you call that, confidence in some context, but I've done public speaking, and I know Scoop has too, and we've been around quite a bit, and that also means that I think we both are pretty familiar with the issues, the challenges that you talk about in your book. And I guess the first thing to ask is about courage. I mean, I think the book is really about how we can manage fear, especially in the context of our communication with others. I mean, how would you define courage?
Well, there are, of course, as many definitions as there are people, probably, but I know that when I am trying something that's new to me or that feels risky, but I'm standing for something I believe in, or I'm standing up for someone else, or I am trying to make a relationship or workplace better, despite the fact that I may be judged and may be judged unfairly or talked about, or that I might be wrong, or that I might look silly, when I'm aligned with my values and I am using my voice or trying to listen better, because that's a challenge for those of us who like to talk, I know that I'm engaged in the practice of courage. I also know that no one can give it to us. We cannot borrow it. We can't buy it. We have to pull it up from inside our very own souls. It's that intangible gift that we give ourselves and others, and it's in all of us, but it really has to be summoned. And since my area of expertise is communication, I thought it might be a good time to try to marry the two and bring those ideas to more people than I usually get to work with. I'm usually training a group of 10 or 30 or 300 or 1,000. And I thought a book might be a little bit a larger audience, a larger platform to try to share with people the hangups really that I have found in myself and my loved ones and in our clients.
So when you were inspired to write the book, it sounds like part of your inspiration was in making the things that you've learned and the things that you've been teaching more broadly available. Was there anything else that sort of inspired you to actually put it into a book form?
Sure. I think the very impermanence of our existence got a fire lit under my butt. And I've been one of those lucky people, I'll say lucky, to have experienced loss at a young age, with a lot of family members passing away when I was 19. And that helped me realize that this is, as far as we know, this is a one-way ticket. And we should share what we've learned. We should share about ourselves. We should care about what others think. And we should stand for what we think is right. And we should try to do it without being a jerk. So I think we all need communication skills, constantly polishing verbal and written and listening skills. And I think also we all have a message to bear based on our experience. So I wanted to give people a short book. I think I kept it around, I have one right here. I kept it around, 140 pages or so, because I know we're all busy, but I wanted to take about 25 years of coaching and teaching at the college level and consulting and see what I could do for those people who aren't going to enroll in a communication class in a college or go to a workshop. Maybe this was a way they could raise their game, to be honest, as I try to raise my own, because everything I write about, I'm also working on. I'm certainly not speaking from a mountaintop.
Well, you talked about courage. And in my time as an IT manager back in a previous lifetime, I had to interview a lot of very young people who were just entering the computer science field or entering IT. And they had courage, but it was an unusual kind of courage. The I'm bulletproof and nothing can ever stop me kind of courage. And that, that's good for some jobs, but it's also kind of a dangerous thing. Do you teach people the different kinds of courage and what they can do for you and to you?
That's so interesting. Different kinds of courage. Well, that might set me on some research for a second book. And mostly I've been telling people to get out of here when they ask me what the second book is about, because this one is still a baby. But different kinds of courage. Maybe there are some different kinds. Like that sounds to me perhaps like feigned courage, the I'm bulletproof and I can handle anything. So isn't it an interesting line we walk between other affirmation, caring what others think, and also self-affirmation and knowing when we know our stuff. And we do a lot of personality assessment at my consulting company, Gladieux Consulting. And that's how we begin one-on-one coaching with any individual interested in growing as a leader or communicator. And one of those constructs that we assess is their degree of other affirmation or self-affirmation. And we find that folks who are highly other affirmed are often more anxious and nervous unnecessarily about what others think. On the flip side of the coin, those who are more self-affirmed could really benefit if they would ask others how others see them, but they're not likely to do that. So I'm always telling clients a good place that we could work towards would be to go for 50-50 or somewhere around a 50-50 definition of success, where part of it comes from within, that confidence, and part of it comes from accepting others' feedback and caring what they think.
I never thought of that. Other affirmed and self-affirmed. That's a good way of putting it. I think kind of one point I get from what you were just saying is that there's not really a one size fits all, and it's much more effective to work with individuals as individuals because each one is going to be so different. So the book itself can be kind of a guideline, but it also helps to get into more of a one-on-one interaction with a person to be able to help them most assuredly.
Sure, but if folks don't have the wherewithal or interest or time or funding for that, we placed an exercise and a pro move at the end of each chapter. After reading the short chapter, I feel that just about any human adult would be qualified to take on the exercise, or I would not have included it. And I know that we can only control our half of any communication with another human, but therein lies some of the best humor and some of the best, oh, that didn't go as I had intended, which makes a great story later when you're coaching or advising someone else who has a similar situation. So I would say a one-on-one guide is wonderful. And if you don't want to work with a coach, just work with the exercises in the book and see how you do. And some of those have people going towards others who they perceive to be unlike them and asking open-ended questions about their experience of life or of the topic at hand. Others have folks looking at how they manage conflict and explaining the 5 different methods that we so far as humans have to manage conflict and figuring out which is your favorite. So trying something different at the next disagreement with family or friends or coworkers. It's really about stretching oneself because one thing I know for sure is that there's often more we can do to improve a situation just by the way we write or speak or listen than we might realize. And I hear so much of that, that excuse of rationalizing the negative, which is one of the 4 hidden challenges I write about in the book, Communicate with Courage, is defining to be right, settling for good enough, rationalizing the negative, and hiding from risk. And rationalizing the negative is when you tell yourself, oh, I've known him for 20 years. He's not going to care. Or they're not management, right? They're not going to do anything differently if I present my idea. Or she never listens. And it goes on and on. They don't care. He's not going to change. She doesn't listen. And so we talk ourselves out of the very thing that really could help a situation. So I say, throw the pitch. Maybe somebody will hit it, maybe they won't, but at least you sleep better at night knowing you gave it a shot. And hopefully skillfully. That's the thing. Because sometimes the way we deliver a question, information, praise, or sticking up for ourselves or others, it can be done in a way that is condescending towards the other, which gets us nowhere. And I know I'm guilty of this when I'm angry or disappointed or hungry or tired. It's a real challenge. This is tough stuff. But I think it is worth stretching ourselves towards a few things we believe in for sure.
One of the hidden challenges you talk about is defining to be right. And that's the one I really had to think about for a while. Can you say a little bit about that one?
Sure. Defining to be right is just being so damn sure that nobody can tell you anything because you have this lived experience or you have your academic background or whatever that is, and you are confident that you are correct and that your way is the right way, more moral or more helpful to community, etc. When others might have something to add, they quickly learn not to approach you with any dissent, discussion, or disagreement because you've made it clear you already know. And we all do it sometimes. We all do each of these 4 hidden challenges sometimes. I'm just trying to name them after 20, 25 years of coaching thousands of business leaders, really, and government leaders and nonprofit leaders and employees at all levels. I started to see the commonalities and thought, I need to write this down. And so I wrote it down for 4.5 years. And then I submitted it and it was picked up quickly, which was great.
Well, I can see a challenge you were facing there. Like if you have somebody who's like that, they're going to be really resistant. It's hard to break through, right?
It's me. It's my parents. It's my big brothers. It's my loved ones. Yes, but I've gotten pretty good at breaking through, especially when I can, I don't want to say this, when I can keep my ego in check and be vulnerable first. That tends to help, as does stating my intention. And it has to be honestly done because whether the human is 4 years old or 104 years old, they have bullshit detectors and they pick up on it when they're being talked down to or BS'd.
Yeah, we were just in a situation like that where somebody, a relative of ours, had shut down because of a conflict that they were in, and there was nothing that we could tell them, to
No.
get them to open up.
Well, hey, shutting down is a form of self-defense also. And I wish I would have known that sooner, because mostly I just got mad for most of my life at people who shut down. I'm just now starting to understand in the last, I guess I'd say, couple of years, that that wasn't done as an affront to me, but that was done as the person trying to grasp for life itself
Yeah, I
and
had a
protect
previous
their own ego.
I had a previous career before IT. I was a journalist, a radio news journalist in San Francisco, and I would encounter people, politicians a lot, and law enforcement, and I would ask them a question that was there was an obvious answer, and they would look you in the eye and say, "No, I never did that. I never said that." How do you cope with people you know they are lying, and they are? It would them telling the truth would probably be disastrous for them. But how do you
It's a great question.
approach that quandary there?
I guess we could look at it as, if I think of myself as a coach or professor or employer or mentor, I could look at that in the way that they believe that to be true, because that is safe. That is what is safest for them at this point. But I tend to come along with a little maybe gentle elbow in the side. Like, I might be way off base. I care about you and your growth. This is what you're paying me for. Or I love you, and so here's why I'm speaking. And I think that if you look a little deeper or a little closer, you might find a different truth, or that two things can be true at the same time. Or you might find some bravery if you want to change your answer or story or perception of this. There's always room for that. And people tend to love to follow leaders who are willing to say, that wasn't exactly correct. I made a misstep. I was misunderstood. I misunderstood. My mistake. Those are the people I want to follow. But the higher up you go in an organization of any type, the more yes people you have around, those that have the most power, and it becomes easier for them to fall into that trap of really living a fictional life.
Yeah, you mentioned the yes people, and I've encountered that, in both journalism and in IT management. And when you have the person that you're trying to deal with surrounded by the aides, the yes people who are going to run interference for the glorious leader, no matter what, how do you diffuse the yes people so you can get the answer you want?
Well, you have to prepare the leader that it will be hard, but there will be rewards to allowing their people to speak more freely and to offer some suggestions for improvement. And then helping those who offer suggestions for improvement to do so diplomatically will go a long way. Also, I would say I try to keep a big book of business, a diverse book of business. So I could, I could say to a leader, if you ever are ready to work on this, I'd be by your side and rooting for you, and it would be hard, but give us a call. And sometimes it's years, but we usually get the call.
This is really interesting to me because in the last part of my work life, I had a company that I had been running, a company, and I had mostly contractors working with me. And I sort of brought them all into the company, and then we converted it to a cooperative. And in a cooperative, theoretically, everybody is kind of at the same level. So you don't have a boss. So I was still, I still had, I guess, a leadership role. And maybe more of a leadership role, maybe a little more weight with what I was doing. But one of the things I felt was like how much pressure came off of me when it was more of a shared responsibility, which was kind of what I had been looking for all along, was, if you can share risk and share responsibility, that in itself can be very powerful. But people who become entrenched as bosses, I am the boss, they don't necessarily see that, and they don't necessarily see how it's working on them, how that's making them miserable, really.
Wow. Well, you're speaking to my life there, because in the last decade or so, after being a sole proprietor for a long time and doing it all myself, I decided to let trusted subject matter experts in. And now every time they come up with something or they're heading that up, whatever the project is, I feel this ridiculous delight that I can't really put into words. I can't really put it into words, but I think it is some weight off my shoulders. We will succeed and we will make mistakes together. Hey, John, was that company were the initials WF?
No, it was actually PA.
Okay.
It was and it was it was web consulting and development cooperative.
Okay.
And as I say, it had been a company. I mean, I had a company originally with partners, and those partners sort of went their own way, and I then had my own company. And I guess when we started, I had partners. I had this sense of shared responsibility with them, and I think that I was trying to get back to that. But it's even more powerful to get into a cooperative relationship with the people you're working with, and to give them ownership of the company as well.
Hmm.
I'm really surprised more people don't do that. Well, maybe I'm not too surprised, but I think if more people did that, they would start to get it.
If they wanted to be successful in that arrangement for communication, I would guess that conflict avoidance would have to be shown the door. Because if you don't have someone with more positional power willing to make an unpopular call, and you have a lot of people as partners or owners that don't like, and most of us don't like conflict, how do the hard decisions get made?
Well, that gets to the problem of a democratic environment. You're going to have conflicts and you're going to have differences of opinion. And it feels somewhat inefficient sometimes to have to spend time talking and talking and talking things through and trying to get to a consensus. That's probably not the most efficient way to operate, but it worked for us. And I think part of the trick there is to have people who really can do that work together, which means, like we had somebody who, when we started converting it to a co-op, we asked one person to leave from the word go because we knew that he wasn't going to be able to work with us in the way that we needed the thing to work. So you do have this selection that you have to make. People, you can't just like take anybody on board. They have to fit with the working group.
True. How did he receive that news that he would have to leave the cooperative?
Not well.
Were you the deliverer of the news?
Oddly enough, yes, I was the one who delivered it. Well, we were all sitting together, but I did the talking. And interestingly enough, I'm the one person out of the group that he didn't get mad at. The one who lowered the boom. But I think it was partly in the way that I sort of delivered the message.
Oh, well, can we just stop right there? Could you give us a tip? Did you state your intention as a good intention? Did you say that it would be a hard conversation to lower defenses? What did you do?
It's been a while, and I'm trying to remember exactly how that went. I think
You
the
did
main
pretty
thing is
well
that
if you didn't get if the anger wasn't directed at you and you had the message to deliver.
yeah, I mean, there's more I could say about that I probably wouldn't hear, but
No.
kind of about the things that was going on with other members of the group. But I will say that I was pretty direct, and I was pretty clear about why we were making the decision that we were making. And I don't know, I think that he sort of respected where I was coming from, and he got it. He understood why I was feeling the way that I was about it. And I think he felt maybe some sense of betrayal from others.
If I could make an observation on John's approach, I've
Yes.
watched I've watched him in action, both in what we're doing here and in old Plutopia productions when we were producing events for South by Southwest. And there were many different personalities involved. And I watched John diffuse bad situations, or at least uh, cope with them. And I think it comes from, I don't know, somewhat of his Buddhist nature. I've watched him. He's not an unkind person, but he can be forceful in his opinions, and I think that works quite well for him. And I was impressed. That's why I've continued associating with him all these years.
What a nice compliment. Sounds like
Yes,
you're trying to
indeed.
be where
Thank
you
you, sir.
are, John. You're trying to be where you are and size the room up and what is needed in the situation while you trust yourself to handle it.
It's hard for me to find any place else to be.
Really?
Wherever you
Wow.
go, there you are.
Be,
Wow.
be all you can be, or be someone else.
Hey, a chapter just came to mind. You mentioned defining to be right, and a paragraph from a chapter in chapter 5, defining to be right, came to my mind, and I just found it. May I read that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, this chapter is called Hidden Challenge Number 2, Defining to be Right. As you gain and use power, it's to your advantage to become known for ethical use of it. Be a person of your word. Let your deeds show your thinking process doesn't intentionally leave out others who are not like you. Power is invisible. Often it's there for the taking. I say, go for it. We need more ethical people interested in gaining power to improve their workplaces and communities. Is it ethical to want to be more powerful? I think so. It's a pro move to strategize about gaining influence so you can make an impactful difference in your interactions. Some tactics that work and are worth the risk when used sincerely include showing your gratitude, getting to know people with decision-making authority, getting to know people who think and behave and believe differently than you, being a broker of vital information by staying informed in your area of expertise, partnering with experts, making a positive, fast showing on tasks, returning favors to those who do favors for you, and being early to accept reasonable changes. Just a couple, and these pro moves that I write about and think about and try to live are simple things that most of us miss in every day, every evening, living with our work, with our families and teams. We walk on by, and that's what the average bear does. But the book and my life's work is about sort of waking people up to all of these opportunities all around us and the thousands of decisions we make per day, where we could sway things one way or the other if we worked on educating ourselves about the issue and educating ourselves about how to communicate about it persuasively.
You know, just one other interesting thing I can tell you
Sure.
is in my long history, I had two business partners that I can think of who won't have anything to do with me anymore and were very upset with me when we stopped working together. One of them, there was a bit of a lag, but I can tell you that in both of those cases, I do kind of have a reputation for being a pretty like honest, ethical person or whatever. In both of those cases, there are people who felt that I didn't live up to my reputation, that I did something that that was a real betrayal of their trust. And I mean, I think in one of those cases for sure, I think that they were mistaken in their impression of what I was doing. And another one, I totally agree with her. I think that I didn't behave very well at one point, and the whole thing sort of fell apart. So,
well, there's no
so
statute of limitations on apologies if you ever feel so moved.
I did do it. I apologize to her for sure.
Did she accept?
But she accepted the apology, but we never did become good friends again or anything
I'm
like
sorry.
that.
I'm sorry.
You know, when you were reading from your book, I thought of something that I had marked that I wanted to read because I think that it
Good.
reflects on you from early on. And this is I'll read this paragraph. It says, the study of conflict was one of my first true loves. A preschool teacher sent a note home to my parents in the 1970s. It said, today, Michelle observed a schoolmate misbehaving and suggested we take a different approach with the child. I had to laugh when this hint about what I'd end up doing for a living turned up in a musty box from the back of a closet. That's pretty good. So
I
you were onto
remember
this
that.
early on.
I know, and I was a quiet, scared. I was scared to talk to those tall people when I was small, but I watched how they interacted with David, and I just felt David needed some understanding and empathy. I didn't know the word, but those teachers could have shown a little more empathy, and I think that's what I asked. I don't remember, but I do know that delighted my mom,
Well, you
who was a really good communicator herself, and she told me then, well, maybe you're going to have a career that relates to coaching or communication.
well you talk about vulnerability in communication. I mean, what role does that play in I guess you say courageous communication? How can you be vulnerable without feeling exposed?
A lot of my coaching clients, between coaching sessions, they all receive 4 or 5 baby steps, a 1-page goal plan, where I'm essentially professionally writing up double dog dares. I double dog dare you to. I don't word it that way, but we've bonded. We've had that first session. We have their personality report in hand. I see their strengths, their weaknesses, and their current challenges in the workplace. And I begin to set forth action items and steps that will help them get closer to who they want to be as communicators. And so for those who have a hard time lowering the wall and kind of letting people see that they don't have it all together all the time and they're not perfect, I ask them to make a list of a few things, hopes that have been dashed, hurts that they live with, things they know they need to work on. There are various areas of some ouchiness that they're now brave enough to approach. And I ask them to document those things that they'd be willing to share with others in polite conversation, so to speak, when they can work it in, so that it's more natural than than some pronouncement. And they see me again 30 days later, and they get to show off the fruits of their labors and show off the goal plan completed with 4 or 5 challenges that they blessed before they started down the road. They approved that goal plan. They gave me their word that they would try these things, and then they get going. So for those who've had a hard time being vulnerable, it's often asking them to share how they feel, share a stumbling block, share something that's challenging them currently, maybe ask for help. It's hard stuff. And, I try not to do any kind of stereotyping at all as a ex-professor and now coach and consultant. And I will generalize in this way. I think it's tougher for men. At least we serve men and women all around the United States for the last 20 to 30 years. And generally what I've seen in the folks that I've coached, it's tougher usually for guys to show any vulnerability. And I think that's societal. I think that boys are brought up to rub some mud in it and get back in the game, whereas girls sometimes have more of a platform or a listening ear to talk about their feelings. And then, well, oh shit, it turns out that to be a really great communicator, you have to also share feelings sometimes, whether you're pleased or disappointed or excited or concerned. So I'm working with a lot of my clients, really of any gender, to work on being able to own what they feel and know when to disclose it at the right time, not to over disclose, not to under disclose, but somewhere in the middle there, we want to know what people are thinking and feeling. And when you add emotion to your communication, such as in the email, I'm so proud to have worked with you on over 400 episodes of this podcast at Plutopia News Network. One of you might write to the other, right? That really is more compelling when you name a human emotion, and especially remember it should be sincere. I hope that's an answer. That might be a circular answer, but those are some things I think about when you bring up vulnerability. It's about showing emotion and not so much that the people around you are overwhelmed and they don't know what to do with it, but enough that we can say, oh, embarrassed. Yeah, I felt that way.
Yeah,
I accept your apology, right? Or excited and nervous. Oh, I felt that way. And with leaders, if our leaders don't tell us how they feel sometimes, what the rest of us do is we will just guess. And then we will tell everyone our guess. And so then it turns out that that leader's intentions are being guessed at by their followers, who are then spreading the news about how that leader might feel. And maybe they just didn't say good morning and they were looking down. And so, oh no, the shit's going to hit the fan. Not necessarily, but we can work with the leader to make sure that they're projecting the energy that they want others to receive.
yeah. My senior year in college, I had a professor who did a wonderful thing for me. He lectured several classes together. He gathered us all in a big group and talked about the positive aspects of failure, how you benefit from failing. And it I was astounded. It's like I was taught to be afraid of failure. It was a terrible thing. It would ruin you. And he put the spin on it that you don't want to ever fail, but when you do, you don't just give up. You learn from whatever that failure taught you and don't do it anymore. And he had gave several, astounding examples of students who reversed their decline as a student by acknowledging the failure and just learning that failure isn't an enemy, it's something that teaches you. Do you have a chance to talk about failure with your clients?
100%. And I like this professor very much. I wonder, as you're telling me this, who taught you that failure was bad? Did that come from your nuclear family?
No, I just came from growing up in Texas.
Okay,
To be brutal.
I'm leaving that one alone. Chapter 8, risks not worth taking. I managed to work in a reference to Bob Dylan. And I know that you both love music, and Scoop, you used to manage the band Vital Signs, as we were talking about. So here's the way I worked in Bob Dylan. This is from Risks Not Worth Taking. And one of the risks in this chapter that I don't think you should take is don't risk setting unachievably high standards. If you have high expectations, I salute and join in your pursuit of excellence. The downside is that we make life harder for ourselves and others as we struggle to accept that we mess up sometimes. It's beautifully human to achieve less than A+ outcomes when taking worthy risks as communicators. Perfection is an unattainable goal. It is a sure route to burnout. Please be gentle with yourself and others, and don't keep score about your wins and losses when it comes to getting outside your comfort zone. The situation you're in, we're all in, reminds me of the Bob Dylan song, Love Minus Zero, No Limit. In it, Bob Dylan sings the praises of a lover who views failure as a success, among other beautiful traits, like being true as ice, true as fire. No book, no coach, no class, no person, nothing is going to polish your communication, as well as the old-fashioned method of try, fail at some part of the interaction, and try again, maybe even when interacting with the same person the very next day. That's actually a pretty fair descriptor of the dynamics in most committed relationships, isn't it? You just keep showing up, as do they. So yes, your act of trying in itself is a success, because do you see all the people not trying? So if you're going to try as a communicator, your words will be wrong, your face will flush, you'll drop your note cards, you'll say the wrong thing, and it will be online, and you will take the post down and then apologize for it. We all make these kinds of mistakes. I would much rather be in the game.
It just
Yeah.
occurred to me to ask, have you found yourself in your consulting at any point working with somebody who you realized was kind of a sociopath? And if so, how do you handle that? I mean, I think that's probably a hard nut to crack, right?
That's a great question. I've worked with people who have self-identified as sociopaths. So I was grateful that I had a degree in psychology, and I was wishing that I had continued on for a PhD in clinical psychology instead of studying organizational psychology at that point. And so then it becomes, I don't understand what your life is like. I don't know what that might be like. It could happen. It could be any of us in that position. So I tried to apply the same tenets and basic principles of ethical, sincere, and persuasive communication while asking the person to be honest with me when they felt that they might be tempted to use some of the strategies I teach unethically. Because
Was it
you put me in the, that's putting the coach in a corner for sure. But then again, I never felt it was right to decline tough client interactions.
I mean, were you able to get a satisfactory result in as
Yes.
you would judge it?
Yes, I was able to get a satisfactory result as I would judge it, but I would like to swoop back, 5 or 10 years later and see how that person is treating other people.
We're going to send you to the White House.
I joke, people say that, and I joke that I'll go ahead and wear my sneakers in case I need to run.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense.
I mean, and some people have said, like, you'd be a good candidate for politics. You present well, or whatever they think about me, but I've never really been interested in that arena specifically, although I have coached mayors, red and blue candidates for their debates and TV appearances, and some other office holders, and I try to coach whoever calls and remain neutral as long as we are using ethical techniques to be better communicators. That's what's important to me.
Yeah, I can imagine that politicians really have to work at having courage in their communications. I mean, you really have to have that courage in order to succeed there for sure. It's probably one of the places where it's most required. I'm wondering if so you've got 4 hidden challenges you've talked about. Is there one that really crops up more than others? Is there one that's kind of more common?
Oh, so interesting. Not that I can tell yet, John, because the book, as I said, is still a baby. It came out in late 2022, and it's still finding its legs, so to speak, and its audience. So I'm hearing from a lot of people about these 4 hidden challenges, and from my own team at Gladieux Consulting. And what people are telling me is, in all 4, I see myself. And I said, I do too. It's more about which one tends to be in the front as I'm trying to move on down the twisty road of life. And then I can sometimes get one in the rearview mirror, but then I interact with someone who pulls at something, and that one's right back up in the front. So I haven't yet heard like overwhelming, like, we are all defining to be right, or why are so many of us settling for good enough? I'm hearing people who read the book tell me, oh yeah, all 4 at different times in my life have held me up.
We're getting close to running out of time based on what we agreed on. But I'm kind of wondering, do you have like a particular exercise from the book that you particularly like and might want to share with us?
Well, I really should say, if you, as people are listening, if we've piqued their interest and they want some help or some guidance, some tools, research summaries, my team and I have spent the last 5 years putting a ton of free personal and professional development resources that are short, to the point, and we think helpful and interesting in personal and professional life at our website. And that's a French last name, so it's tough to spell, but it's gladieuxconsulting.com, and that's glad, IEUX consulting.com. So you could go there and you'd be busy for a year taking yourself through some communication exercises. I'm just going to pick one out here. Here we go. I'm going to choose this exercise from chapter 6. And it's an exercise that I think is especially prudent to undertake. It would take 5 or 10 minutes, and you would just need to think about a disagreement you've had. So here is from chapter 6, Rationalizing the Negative. The exercise is: start a fresh, clean page. Then name the topic of a recent disagreement you've had with someone else. It could be in the past or it could be present. Title one column me and one column them, and then try to list a few respectable points of each position. It's usually easier and more fun to come up with the respectable points of your own position. So aim for, 3 good things about your position and 3 tolerable things about the person that you disagree with about their position. Your ego is not always your amigo. So you might need to ask your ego to stand down as you consider the points that you're going to put under them. From here, now you have something that you can try to respect about the other person's position, and you could speak those aloud. And that might help them in turn listen to you. It creates higher ground. Makes me think of the beautiful Stevie Wonder song. Examples: we both love our kid more than anything, but we disagree about where to send him to school. Or we both want this project to succeed, but we disagree about the approach. Or we both want to be heard, but when we fight, we keep interrupting one another. Forge ahead, and hopefully the vibe will change from you versus me to us versus the problem. And I've done it on the back of a napkin at a family reunion. Flip that napkin over, I wrote me, them, and then I had a couple points with which I could approach that person to say what I had to say, but I opened with, hey, I know that ... You don't get much time off. And it's nothing to you to have a couple beers, but I'm noticing that you're speaking to people in this way. So I get you deserve a good time. You work so hard. Here's my concern. And that always goes better when I can remind myself to slow my roll and at least mentally do a me and them column and then speak to the them column. So there's a sample exercise.
Well, save that exercise for the next Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Kind
absolutely.
of perfect.
So
Well,
challenging.
Just kind of in your experience and what you've been doing, what kind of transformations do you see in organizations that you work with based on the kind of consulting that you're doing with them?
I see when we do strategic planning, I see organizations and teams smartly decide to choose 2 to 3 main initiatives to focus on and then put tactics beneath for the next 2 to 3 years. And that usually yields a great return on investment and gets people excited because they are typically raising their hand for a tactic that matters to them. And as facilitators, we try to make sure that all voices are heard. And that's why sometimes it's good to have a third party present. Because, those extroverts that are also assertive, or they might, could be an introvert, doesn't matter. Someone who's defining to be right can really shut down discussion. So we're always very happy to be a third party facilitator. And when we work one-on-one with people in executive and employee coaching, one of my favorite transformations is to see them see a page of graphs all about their unique strengths and unique abilities. No two ever the same, but we can show them in percentiles how much or how little they have of different styles in their personality and in their communication. So they know, wow, I'm top 1 percentile in this. I always thought I was pretty good at it, but your quantitative data sort of proves that out. And then we warn them, oh yes, you are extremely spontaneous or extremely orderly or extremely attainment motivated or extremely other affirmed, whatever that is. There's also the slippery ice of, man, do not rely on that too much, because when we lean on only our strengths, that's when we overuse them. And that's when the fall will happen. So we try to help people celebrate their strengths and also look with love, with self-love, at their weaknesses. And then we offer them some baby steps to try to, I guess you could say, remediate some of those areas. And I'll give you an example. Part of our assessments include the conflict management styles. So we have 5 options as humans. When I first took the most robust personality assessment that I could find that we now use, I saw that I was competing 68% of the time. To summarize, that was my preference. And that's too much. It would be great if I was also collaborating, accommodating, knowing when to avoid and when to compromise. But something in my DNA and in my upbringing was more about win, debate to win. And then I thought about how that had impacted my personal, even more than professional relationships. And I was sorrowful about it. I had a lot of regrets about it. I felt very immature about trying to get the last word so often in the past. So as I evolve as a communicator, I'm picturing some of my own results, the coaching that I can do for myself as I look at those results. And I knew I needed to go towards accommodating more, which is to let the other get the win, let the other have the microphone or the spotlight or the idea that we try, or to say I'm sorry when I mess up. And I think I'll work on that until the day I die, because personality is about equal parts life experience and personality, as far as we know now, from the best research we can get our hands on. You, as you show up in the world, it's a lot about your life experience. It's a lot about DNA. DNA is unchangeable, life experience is unchangeable, but we can understand ourselves, move forward, and try to elevate the way that we communicate. So I've seen a lot of change, especially in how people manage conflict, and that makes me very happy. So we have some people who were dead set on just get the hell out of the room, avoid, 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 write me a note and get me out of this. They are now able to collaborate and compete. And those who were so eager to compete, they can chill back a little and maybe do some more accommodating, avoiding, and compromising. But not until you lay the cards out in front of someone and say, here are the cards in your hand, poker player. You keep playing this same card. Would you like to try a different card? Things might go better for you. Everybody wins. So yeah, it's a very addictive profession.
And looking back, I think that the point where I started feeling kind of immature was the point where I started maturing.
Exactly. Well, I guess as long as we're on the wake up list, every day, hopefully we wake up better. And while we're here, we're taking up this space, we're breathing this air, we're interacting with other human beings. I got a lot of that from my mom and dad for sure. Why not lift others up? But also advocate for yourself. And education is something no one can take from you. It's never too late to start to study how we communicate. We could, if we're 97, by the time we're 98, we could be a much better public speaker or listener.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time recently uh, looking back on things I've done. I was never one to really dwell on the past when I was doing all these things, but I realized the projects and jobs I was most proud of, I was totally in over my head. I had no, there's no right to be in those positions, but I didn't stop me because I knew it going in. It's like, well, I don't know if I'm even worthy of this job, but it didn't stop me, and it worked out to be really nice because, I was never one to be motivated by fear until more recently. Fear of demise, comes
Yes,
on at this age. But
I hear you.
in your
Um,
20s and 30s, it's less of a worry.
Someone thought you were ready, and sometimes we need to trust people who see our potential.
Yeah, I guess I was a good bullshitter.
And hey, Scoop, I love you for that. The only cuss word I allowed myself in Communicate with Courage in the book was bullshit, because that's one of the risks I would say is not worth taking. And when one of my best advisors, my big brother, Mark Gladieux, read it for me with a very critical eye, almost as only big brothers can do. He gave me a few pages of notes, and one of the notes in bold was, you managed to make it through your whole book without cussing until I got to risks not worth taking, and there was bullshitting as its own header. Are you sure you want to do that? And I thought about it and I said, can you think of a better word? Is stretching the truth for one's own advantage, and I do advocate that everybody do try that out. Do try bullshitting sometime in front of an audience or someone who's really important to you, and it will feel so terrible. You'll be done with that because it's such an awful experience to try to be bullshitting. So I think you've earned, I think you've earned the right to teach, both of you. And I know
Yeah,
I'll be listening. And congratulations on 400 plus episodes. I mean, that's outstanding. You'll never really know the ripple effect of all of that education you're providing, but thank you.
thank you.
Sure.
I think it was actually 300 plus.
300
It's
plus.
still a lot.
It's
yeah,
still a lot.
we're closing in on 400 there.
You're creating deeper forms of connectivity and community by bringing us together, even folks who just want to listen.
I think we're really starting to hit it now. It feels to me that in our recent discussions with people that we've, like, I don't know. It seems like there's more depth to the conversations than there was when we started out. What do you think, Scoop?
Depth is in the eye of the beholder, I guess.
Yeah.
I know some people who you walk through the depth of their soul wouldn't get your feet wet. So
I want to raise my hand and recommend to our listeners and viewers today a prior episode that I've been enjoying, and I re-listened this morning, and it was your November 25th, 2024 Thanksgiving episode, and it was with Tiffany Lee Brown and Jan Hirschfield. Tiffany
Jane.
is a
Yeah.
writer. Jan or Jane?
Jane.
Jane Hirschfield, excuse me, the poet. So we had Tiffany Lee Brown and Jane Hirschfield, and some of the great things that came up in that one, you talked about brave communication, and you were speaking about how sometimes it's worth communicating just to find out what there is to find out, but recognizing we can't control the outcome. And intention counts in conversations. And maybe if we're all out to create a world with less suffering, that's an intention worth stating. And also how to foster genuine dialogue. So, all the parts of my brain that love communication were lighting up during the November 25th episode 2024. Good stuff. And you mentioned
Tiffany and Jane are brave communicators. They really are.
they are indeed.
Yeah, Jane told you as you started to interview her that she expected you to uphold your part of the conversation.
Indeed.
Yes, courageous.
Do you
Courageous
think I
poet.
did? I hope I did.
I think you did.
There's nothing that's any more fun than this, just sitting and talking to people, really.
Oh, you also spoke in that episode about the Better Angels Project was mentioned, and then that got me thinking about the Better Angels Project and how important it is. So I wanted to bring up one of the tenets of that project that's trying to get regular folks like you and me talking to other regular folks who disagree with us and find some common ground. And also they're trying to build a communication container where we listen without so much judgment. And that
I thought about that when you were talking about the exercise earlier, sort of like actually basically what the exercise was trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes, right? Try to understand their perspective.
My ego,
that's powerful.
My ego hates it. I just want to define to be right and hide and I want to settle for good enough and rationalize negative. That's what I want to do. But when it comes time for my last breaths, I will have regret if that's the way I live. So I'm trying to take care of future me and push myself to be a better communicator and push others, through this book to find the fun in trying to be a better communicator.
I always thought that life was a challenge, but now I realize that it's 4 challenges.
Oh, that sounds like a book blurb, doesn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
If you guys, as you have your growth and life is going on, if you want to talk again about any specific challenge or anything related to communication, I'll get ready and study up and come back. That's for sure.
Right on. We'll definitely invite you back.
I really respect your style, your sincerity, and your expertise.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks for joining us. I guess we are about at the end of the talk now, and this has been fantastic. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Great to meet you guys.
Thank you.
Great to meet you. We'll talk to you again.
I hope.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lepkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.